Hello, people. Hi. So I will be doing the live today with Natalia. I apologize a little bit for my lateness. Me and Alexi were in Amsterdam to actually have a meeting with culture and ondernemen, and we were a little bit late with that. We actually spent more time talking about the prospects on how to differentiate the gallery and the foundation work and how to have a little bit of funding for artists. So yeah, and today we plan to have a talk with one of our artists, Natalia, who's going to join us briefly, hopefully. And we are going to discuss a little bit about her background, about what she is currently doing, what we are currently doing together, and what the future plans are. And actually, she is going to be, and yeah, and we'll see where it takes us. And we're going to explore a little bit.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Natalia.
Yeah, you can't see me, yes?
No, like it apparently is loading.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Can you see us?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, at least I'm gonna manage to talk to you a little bit, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's always technical problems sometimes.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, but it should be fine.
I can repeat request. Maybe the second time I will appear. I don't know.
Okay, let's try. I'll keep our public entertained. Let's see a little bit how to do that.
Yes.
Okay, I will kick you out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if it works now. I think sometimes it's just no, I think it's just connection problems or something like that. But yeah, in any case, today let's see now if it works. We were discussing a little bit how to approach differently things around the platform. Hi. Still no.
No, what the problem is.
Well, we hear you, so maybe we can start speaking a little bit and then see when it gets annoying, then we just drop it.
Yeah, okay.
I'll let you know. Okay, so, well, hi, welcome. Um, even though you are a lovely black square. For today, I was planning to do a little bit of introduction towards you and your practice, what we have been doing together for the past, year and a half now. And hi to everybody who's saying hi on live on the chat. And then after that, we can maybe give a little bit of a preview of what we are doing with our project. What you say?
Yes, yes, of course.
So for those that are not familiar with Natalia's work, she's an embroidery artist. She's also one of our represented artists, and me and her, we started working together, I think around December 2018, something like that. And we had our first exhibition at the end of March 2019, and it was our first project, our first collaboration together. And yeah, so do you maybe want to explain a little bit into depth what your practice is about?
Yeah. I'm a textile artist, and I work in with embroidery, but not embroidery on cotton or some different kind of textile like traditional technique. I'm working with plastic and use this plastic as textile. And I use plastic because I think that this material, for me, is kind of a textile of our times, because, of course, a lot of plastics everywhere, and this is very usual thing which we use in our everyday life. And I think that it represents very well our times. For that reason, I use this material as a base for my embroidering. I also working with installation and sculptures. It's not like some flat objects, but this is three-dimensional objects. What about the conceptual side of my practice? I'm working with war legacy, with them of war legacy and post-memory. And also with some, I put sometimes in my objects some ecological aspects, because I see my practice as a recycling process, because I use mostly plastic bags, some plastics which already had some function in the past, and I recycled this plastic. Yes, it's a good example to in art objects. Yes.
So this actually, yeah, I'm very privileged to have a few pieces by Natalia. That's really nice. I really love it.
Nice. It's a small part of my still going installation, which calls Man Thinks They Are Better Than Grass. And I sew a lot of bonds, which I install in different nature landscapes, as dunes or forests or seashore, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. Yeah, I remember we also took some pictures in Hoek van Holland.
Yes,
of some of these.
Yeah, that was
really nice. Yeah. And it was actually also the pile of bones was part of the first exhibition that we did together.
Yes.
And you had a lot, like you still have a lot, like 80 of these, or both in white and black.
Yes, so I'm continue to produce these bones. Yeah. Because this is very flexible and size-specific installation, because I can put these bonds everywhere I want.
We also had them in Torino.
Yes, yes. And one thing that I use plastic for shell of objects, but I fill my objects with cotton wool or just wool, and all my sculptures have this very natural soft core. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And they're actually quite soft. I mean, they're a little bit coldish because of the plastic, but they're still like really soft and really nice to hold. It actually makes it weird. So you mentioned also post-memory. So I was thinking to maybe explain a little bit to those who are not too familiar with the term. And it is actually something that we discovered in our first exhibition together, in the first chapter of our long-term project that we are now still working on. And the post-memory is this sort of trauma that is handed down generation to generation. So the fact that maybe your grandmother or your mother have been part of conflict, of a war conflict. It also influences younger generation. It also influences you as you grow up, as you live your life, as you perceive reality. And that was actually really an interesting project because we talked about your grandmother and also about her experience during the war and how actually little of that experience she told you about, but the small bits were kind of traumatizing, and you still remember about it, and you still are fascinated by this process. So yeah, maybe we can. Would you say we can explain a little bit more about what we did for the first time together? Okay.
I think that the whole thing about post memory, about this trick when you making some projects in that field, that how you can tell the history or some traumatic experience, not being the witness of that experience. And I started we started to explore this theme for a story from my family and from a story of my grandmother, because she passed away, and but in the childhood she told me some stories about wartime and post-war time in Sevastopol, and of course now it's looks like some fairy tales because I don't have this kind of experience, and all I know about the war, about all the times, and because my grandmother told me about that, but I don't know some details, and I don't. I can feel how she feel in that time, it was interesting to show that experience, not to be witness of that experience and that times. And in first chapter, we tell these stories as fairy tales. It mix some historic events which were held during the Second World War, mixed with some emotional stories, with some maybe imaginational stories, I don't know. And I think in kind of way it makes this story more realistic, more true.
That's true. No, I very much agree. And we actually created this sort of fictional character, which put all these experiences together. So a little bit of yours, a little bit of your, well, most of your grandmother, and some of your mother too. But we did not talk directly about the war, like not really. It was more of like a background presence, and sort of like a ghost hovering above. And I think it had like a different approach, because a lot of people did, like a lot of visitors, I think, did not know what they were getting themselves into when they came into the gallery, into the exhibition, and they were starting little by little reading the text and looking at the pieces to understand what really it was about, and they could approach it from a personal point of view. So it was not a lecture. It was not like historical events, but they were tales. They were experiences of like real experiences from people. and it had another. I think it had another impact. That was the difference, and we actually wanted that.
Yeah,
Because
I was afraid that nobody will be interested in my personal story, in the story of my family. But when you started honestly tell that story, people started to involve in this atmosphere, in that story, and I was very happy when visitors of exhibition started to tell their own personal stories, tell stories about their grandmothers, grandfathers, and maybe the most interesting moment was when visitors started to tell about this war, the same war, but from the different angles of history and from different countries. And sometimes we were, in the past, our grandparents were like enemies to each other. But now we have this opportunity to discuss all that stuff, not being enemies to each other. And it's really nice. It's really, I don't know, it's magic. I don't know, because when I presented the second chapter in Moscow the last year, and one guy who was visitor of in the opening of exhibition, he's German, and his grandfather was enemy of my grandmother. My grandmother was enemy of his grandfather, but we had this opportunity to talk with each other without some anger, without some bad emotions. And I think this is this piece for which our grandparents fight for. I don't know. I see this situation like that. Yeah. And I like that when we talking about the war in this project, mostly we talking about the peace, because we have only these emotions which I see as a legacy of that cruel past. And these emotions, in most cases, drive us maybe in some wrong way. But this kind of fairy storytelling, this fictional storytelling, makes this story in same way more cruel, but in same way more therapeutic. Yeah, and we talking more about peace in that project, and I really like how this project looks like, because when you're talking about the war, it's very tough sometimes.
It is.
And especially when you live in a place with a huge patriotic influence. It's sometimes very difficult to find the way how to talk about about this story, not to be part of opposite sides. You choose some kind of middle way and try to balance between some very patriotic side or non-very patriotic side. But I want to tell my story very carefully, but on my own rules, of course.
Yeah.
For that, we choose that way of some kind of mixing of fictional and true events.
like one of our guests just told us, yeah, that the way of, like, the emotional way of, as the way art is used to communicate and convey emotion in the purest form, is really magical. And I agree with that. And we discussed lengthily about it, me and you, Natalia. Also because this emotional part is not part of history books. Like, you have the dates, you have people, you have, how many people died, how many were sent to fight that battle or whatever, but you actually don't have first-hand accounts. Like, you have very little first-hand accounts of what happened and how people managed to survive that and what they came back with. And when we were doing research, when I was doing research, this was taken down to the fact that, like, emotional and personal accounts are not reliable, which for me it's completely bullshit, because the emotional accounts and the emotional part of something that is so excruciating as war are as important as knowing who fought where and what kind of, I don't know, weapons were used, or the composition of bombs, or those kind of, like, small details. And like you just mentioned before, it's also used as therapy in a way, because most of my of the accounts that I have of war, of soldiers, once they would be back from the fronts, then they would just be left to themselves. Like, you also mentioned before that a lot of people came to you with their own stories, but for example, I have very little recollection of, or have little knowledge of what my grandparents went through the war, because they were not able to talk about it because of the trauma. So I have very little information around it, and cannot exactly understand fully the trauma of it as it is now, as it was then. So I really think there is a therapeutic way of, like, a therapeutic element of it, and it comes about talking, of course, about the trauma, but also discussing about peace. How we are a little bit privileged. Well, we are a lot privileged not to live yet in a war zone, or in a in conflict in general.
The thing is that when this title of the whole project, when I thought about that and I called it 100 Years War, of course, it was inspired by real 100 Years War, because for me it's now looks like some fairy tale stuff with a lot of heroes and interesting stories, but also for me it's a metaphor of never-ending war. We talking a lot about past in other chapters, but for me it's also about the future, and I don't want that future, but it's like permanent fear of that future, because we see how people don't want, how people like repeat mistakes, mistakes, and of course some fear about the future. I don't want it, but still I feel that it's like never-ending war. Every person has his personal war, but we as a people together, we have this opportunity to face with a new kind of challenge, with a new war, with a new revolution. I don't know. And for that reason, for me, it's really important to give some personal emotions in that projects, to tell some personal stories, because this personal experience easily can become experience of all people, because we have a lot of in common. Yeah, of course,
Yeah, that's
we
true.
have different experience, but we still have a lot of in common, and especially like one of my red thread in all sculptures. It's red color. It's
Yes.
bloody stuff, because um, doesn't matter what the color of your skin, or what the experience you have, history, amount of money, and all the stuff. We have the same color of our blood, of our inner world, and it's red, and it's like something common for everybody, like in before the face of a death. I don't know how to tell it,
Yeah,
but this is bloody stuff. It's what unite us together. Yeah.
that's true. I agree. I forgot to actually take the brooch that you made for me. We could have showed it, but well, next time or another time. And you have a lot of documentation on
Maybe
your
I also can show something, but I looked
yeah, it's a bit.
today at the black square. Sorry, guys. Yeah,
Well, black, it's also another one of your colors, so
yeah,
you know
yeah.
it
Yeah.
kind of makes sense in my opinion. And maybe we can talk a little bit. You mentioned before the future, and we also mentioned about the environmental elements in your practice. So maybe we can give a little bit of a snippet on what we are working on. What do you say?
Yeah, of course. A little bit, because I like secrets.
No, little. Yes, exactly. A little bit, just a little bit, but yeah. So we're working right now on actually the first interlude of the third chapter,
Yes.
because the third chapter is going to be dedicated to the elements. So water, fire, earth, wind, like those natural elements. And we are now working on the water interlude. And it's, well, we can say that it's going to be still about the Black Sea, so Sevastopol. And it's going to really be about the sea this time. So not only as part of the title, but a little bit about the topic, right?
Yes, yes, yes. We still in Sevastopol. We still continue to tell story of the place, and
Yeah.
for me also like never-ending story. Because my hometown gives me a lot of inspiration, and it's also about my identity, and maybe that's the main reason which why I try to talk a lot about this region. And also Black Sea, it's one of the most important inspiration in this new chapter. But in the next chapter, it will be also a lot about some ecological aspect, because I think that now, of course, it's very important also discuss about this topic, and it's closely related to Black Sea region too. And in that chapter, we will tell story about still about some historical events, but
Yes.
But together with some environmental aspects of that region.
So it's gonna be like from a different point of view.
Yes,
And
yes.
also literally, and it's also interesting how like especially maybe those who are not familiar with what we do, but the reason we talk so much about Sevastopol because well, you are from it, but you come from that part, but it's also like a city with a lot of war legacy. So like a lot of conflict, and you can see it in the geography and how people live and celebrate, like, you know, Victory Day and that kind of recurrences. So there is a lot to talk about. When you think you have said, well, maybe not all of it, but most of it, you find out that, okay, there is actually that battle or that place or that mount, that valley, that bay that is, you know, has been in historically relevant in some kind of conflict.
Yes, yes.
And it's also like a quite new city. Like Sevastopol was founded 200 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, in 1783. Recently
So,
was the day of the city, the birthday
oh yeah,
of the
that's true.
city. Yes, and also Crimea, where
Yeah, that's
Sevastopol is situated, has amazing nature, amazing
true.
atmosphere, and I cannot to see this city without this nature environment, because it's like everything together. And for me, it's still like a big question how in that very beautiful environment can were these cruel events. A lot of
Yeah,
war was held in inside that nature.
yeah,
And for that reason, maybe in this next chapter, we will look into war legacy with natural environment. Yeah,
that's
but
true.
we a
Yeah,
little bit started with in the previous chapter, because the second chapter of our project was about the Sapun Mountain, and it's very important from historical view and from natural view mountain in Sevastopol, and everything. Our story was around this place and about ghosts who still live in that place, and about some past and about some presence of the place. And recently, I started to remember that when I still lived in Sevastopol, I already started some kind of projects about how historical and nature things links together. And I remember two of my old projects, which were maybe some starting points for that. I don't know. Yeah, and yes.
also because you come from a background of geographical studies, so you have an idea, like you're very connected to nature as a person and as an artist.
Yeah, because
That's what it felt.
I studied in university geography, and of course This education built some kind of this geographical thinking of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
How I try to see the world, and I can't just take one point. You have to see one object from different points of view.
Yeah.
And it's related in how you see it in space and how you see it in the time. And for that reason, I also really like to travel in time and see how my hometown looked in the past. And of course, I think a lot about the future of that region. But thankfully for my geographical education, I think about the whole planet, because you can't be just a person of one place. You see yourself of how citizen of a big planet, of a big ecosystem, which includes not only the humanity, but also animals, different ecosystems, soil, I don't know, clouds, air, sun, everything.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
I very much agree. And actually, in September, there is going to be a little bit of the future of Sebastopol.
Yes,
sort of.
Yes.
Right.
I think it will be not about future Sebastopol, about the whole planet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But we just take Sebastopol as an example, as a reference.
Yeah, of course, because maybe I see it's not only one point on the map, but
exactly.
It's like some small system which can give a whole picture about the whole planet. I don't know, you just see in one place, but you can expand with view of that one small city, for example, but expand on the whole planet, because we also if we talk about emotions or history of humanity, it's not only some small personal stories, but it's common for every person in the planet, because we are so different, but we are so the same at the same time. Yes.
I agree. I very much agree. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I also learned some things that I didn't exactly know about your work, so that was really nice.
Oh, nice. I still have a lot of secrets. Yeah.
Yeah, you do. Which makes it, so interesting to talk with you, because there is always something new. There is always something different about it. Yes. So, well, thank you so much for explaining and for being here and for just partnering up. I think we talked for like 40 minutes without really noticing, and that was really nice. Even though you looked very minimalistic in your black sweater.
I'm looked today so good, guys.
No, baby.
Like a big diplomatic dream. I don't know.
Well, very Black Mirror-y, like this kind of science fiction-y way.
Future, guys. In the future, everybody will looks like that. Yeah, like big black square.
Yeah. We also share this interest about science fiction, which is like scary and interesting at the same time. Like you have new ideas about what could the future bring and how it's going to be like a different experience, but sometimes it's like very scary. But yeah, we're still gonna be ready to fight. In a way.
Yeah, we will survive, of course.
Yes. Probably underwater. Probably. Or like the Netherlands would be submerged.
Humans have good opportunity to adapt
That's
to
true.
any kind of circumstances. And
Right? We're really resilient. Like like really we are the pandemic. Like Corona is like
yeah.
like we are the problem of the planet, not the viruses. But let's not start
Wow.
that. There is a huge there is another 40 minutes or like 2 hours to talk about that. But I think
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe next time. Yeah.
maybe next chapter.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, of course.
Maybe next chapter. So yeah, I mean, we didn't set out how many chapters the project is going to be, so we can just keep on doing that until we die or something. So. Okay. Probably going to be submerged, but whatever. So thank you so much for joining, and thank for all of you for all our viewers who joined and who heard us, who listened to us. And probably for sure next week we're gonna have another live with another artist. I think we're gonna talk a little bit more about other practices as well, and we'll see. And in September you're all invited to the not to the opening because probably not gonna have an opening, but do come and see the exhibition, which is going to start from the first weekend of September, so from the 5th. And then you have an idea of what we were talking about or what we were hinting about, and hopefully you enjoyed it.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you very much again, and
thank you too. Thanks everybody who listened to us. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, and have a lovely evening.
Yeah, you too. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye bye.